Welcome back, y'all. It's Auntie Donna Brown. We're going into our second podcast here. I'm really excited. Always Resourceful presents Auntie Donna Brown, bringing you real people to share information I think you need to know as resources so that you can live a healthier, more educated, more prosperous life, and of course, be prepared to pass down that generational wealth. So join me today as I welcome a very, very special guest. This is a friend. This is a colleague. This is Administrative Judge Thanayi Lindsey, who happens to be running for a judicial seat, Superior Court Judge, seat 181. Welcome to the stage, Thanayi. It's so great to see you. Thank you. Listen, you are so incredibly busy. First and foremost, thank you for making Always Resourceful and our little creators table a stop along the way.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and I'm so happy to be here.
Listen, there's a lot going on. Before I talk to you, I just have to preface this to say, it's been a minute since I did my first podcast, and it's really been important, as you know, that I check in with the Creator God, who gives us all the best ideas for creation, on exactly what it is that you need to have to prosper. There's something going on that's been a little bit heavy on my heart. A lot of you have been hearing that there are changes going on with Voting Rights Acts. Many of you probably don't even know what that means. And this is not the place to go into that, but it is the place to set you up to be prepared for the outcome. And in essence, in a nutshell, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 is being slowly dismantled. First, it happened with Shelby County versus Holder in 2013, when the first section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was struck down. More recently, in May of 2026, we had Louisiana versus Calais, and that struck down or dismantled a large part of Section 5. Okay, great. Auntie Donna, what does all that mean? Here's what it means. You got to be prepared. Time out for any assistance we may have had in the past to right the wrongs of the past. Now, whether that should continue, that's for someone else to decide in another forum. But what I do know is right now, today, in June, we're going to have an election. And I need everyone within the sound of my voice to be prepared, okay, to understand what it means to select a qualified candidate. And so when I started thinking about it, how do I share how to pick qualified candidates? The first person that came to my mind was my friend, Judge Thanayi Lindsey. So Thanayi Lindsey, please tell us, who are you, girl?
Wow. So I am from Los Angeles, California, originally, and grew up in South Central Los Angeles. It was called South Los Angeles, but now South Central Los Angeles. Two-parent household. Went through the public school system until the second grade, and then went into the private school system. And so I'll tell you about that because you kind of smiled a little bit. So part of my background or my story was always an A student, right? But I had this thing about if someone challenged me, I would step up to the plate.
All right now.
So I got challenged a lot in school for fighting. And that's not something I'm proud of. But I was in second grade, 8 years old, between 7 and 8 years old. But the fighting was excessive. So to the point where I was suspended a lot. And then I was also in the process of being expelled from LA Unified School District for fighting. And so, again.
You're a judge. Are you telling me as a child My goodness. I love this. I only stop and pause because I always talk to my audience about how sometimes things that appear to be challenges early on actually might be strengths, superpowers undercover. Because what I'm hearing is this woman has always been an advocate, a passionate advocate from day one, probably coming from her parents, but I don't know. Keep telling us more.
So I grew up with two wonderful, awesome parents. My dad worked for the post office, and he started delivering mail. So he was, before that, my dad was drafted, how he came to California. So they both are from Texas. And my dad was drafted in the Army. He was attending Prairie View A&M. And he got drafted into the Army, and that took him to California. And my mother was also going to attend Prairie View A&M, but she had a death in the family. She lost her mom. So the family had to move to California. So they met here instead of meeting at Prairie View A&M.
Oh,
Never knew each other, right? So it was destined. Like I love telling that story about how they really met. And they met back in the day. And I told my mother, if we did this, we would, cut up in 50 states.
Right.
But my mother wasn't driving, and my dad asked her, "May I take you home?" He could, drive and pick her and let her take her home. And she got in the car. I'm like, "You got in the car with a
stranger,
right?" And she's like, "Back then, men would take you. They did their word was their bond. They
That's
did
right.
exactly what they said they were going to do."
Right.
So your dad, took me home, and we started dating, and it went from there. So so they grew up in small town. So I had that small town upbringing. And I really enjoyed it, but then I didn't because they were very strict parents. They sheltered us a little bit I think they over sheltered us, but that's okay. But that's how they wanted to raise us, to protect us, because they grew up in segregated areas of Texas.
Right.
My mom is in her 80s, so they were a part of some of the Jim Crow, the signs that would say whites only or colored only.
Wow.
So they knew that, they experienced that. And so they wanted to shield us from that and give us a better life. So I remember my dad telling me stories that if I didn't hunt or fish, I wouldn't eat. So he grew up with his dad. So he was very resourceful. Even years before he passed away, he would he would make things. We would call him the Black MacGyver of South Central. So he would live. That was his nickname.
About that. That goes way, way back. This is a bit of a resourceful person here. Resourceful origins. Continue, please.
Right. So I don't know if you remember the TV show in the 80s, like MacGyver would make a bomb out of, a balloon and salt and something else, like just household items. He would make a weapon or make something to create a way out to save the day. And so my dad would have those resources, right? And those types of things. So I talked about how my parents met earlier, and I wanted to kind of go back over that. So grew up in a two-parent household with my sister and older sister. So I'm the youngest of two daughters. My dad was a girl dad. My mom had her two, wonderful daughters. And from there, graduated from high school and went to Purdue University.
So, Your Honor, you say you were from a humble beginning. You even had a few scuffles, right? And I get that. But the next part, when you say, and you went and graduated and you went to Purdue University, that's a top university in the country. How did you get from South Central, roughing it up,
I wasn't roughing it up. That was just in the second grade. I don't want you all to think I've been roughing it up the whole time. That was when I was A.
The larger point is, regardless of what your environment is, right? There's always an opportunity, if you have it, to harness your intellect, it sounds like.
Yes.
And you had figured out how to do that before. Did you meet anybody in high school who was a role model that may have helped you decide, I want to shoot for something like a Purdue?
Yes. So it was really at my church that we grew up in. So the name of the church was Calvary Baptist Church. It was on 60th and Compton. So it was on the east side of Los Angeles. The pastor, if you all may know, it was a very prominent pastor in the 70s and 80s, Pastor Manuel L. Scott Sr.
Yes.
Okay, so he was my pastor. He married my parents. He baptized me. I joined church under him, under his leadership. And so that church, he really was into educating everyone. He felt that if you had an educated church membership group, you would have a better church that would give. And so we were mentored at the age of, like I say, 7 or 8. I was always on a college campus because I would go to USC at the music school called Courtroom. And so I was always on a college campus every Saturday mornings, saw the Trojans marching band and all that stuff. So that was like second nature for me to go to college. I knew I was going to go to college. I saw all the older members of the church, attended their graduations, was on college campuses with them. So was always mentored at a very young age. And that was really the driving force for me to go to. I knew I would go to college, and I just picked the one that I wanted to go to.
So I just want to make a note, because I think this is just further evidence of how greatness and generational legacy start at home. And here you're saying you were always, first of all, shout out to the church, okay? Because you know Auntie Donna Brown is all about making sure you get in connection with your higher power. And for me, I make it clear, for me, it's God and Jesus, it's them. You get to pick who you want to be. But I do think it's very important that you have a community environment, and that community helps center who you are and helps direct where you want to go. In this particular case, your church was instrumental. So is your family.
Yes.
And they sent you to places that gave you exposure.
Absolutely.
And would you say you had mentorships? When was the first time you ever met an attorney or even a judge?
At church. There were several attorneys in my church, but they were male attorneys, Black male attorneys. They were older. And so the first Black female attorney I met was in high school. It was one of my classmates' parent. Her mom was an attorney, and she came to career day and spoke. And just something about her personality, what she talked about, how she carried herself. I knew that I wanted to, that was who I saw myself in her. Wow. So if you could see yourself in that person, then just that is like the blueprint of me being here today.
Thank you for sharing that. Please get your kids in programs that will allow them to get exposure. I, too, had a chance to go to some colleges. Now, mine was UCLA because I had an uncle who taught there. But it was night and day. This is 2 female attorneys here who saw it early on. And so I think as you expose your kids, it's hard to be to want to become something you've never, ever seen. And I think colleges are a great place. USC had an early program for music. It had UCLA had early programs with moot court. Whatever your local colleges are, wherever you're watching this, please take a moment to get your kids out there. Now, listen, that's enough of the background stuff. I got to kind of catapult into what your honorship has really done in her life. And I really appreciate your patience in sharing that. I asked her to share that. But let's talk professionally, okay? About Judge Thanayi Lindsey. And let me say this. I've never been a judge. I was in-house counsel for the United States government. And I've been attorney for private corporations, Fortune 500 companies. When I was in-house counsel, we was afraid of y'all administrative law judges.
Oh, really?
We had great reverence for you.
Wow.
Because many of you might know, a lot of the federal regulations, wherever you may have a complaint, housing, Department of Agriculture, Federal Trade Commission, social services, whatever it is, they all have an arm that administers the regulation. Then they will have attorneys who will also hear cases and potentially try to level the playing field so that all citizens have right to fair access of these rules that have been promulgated through the Fed. Now, stop me if it needs to be corrected a little here.
No.
And so while we would hear the cases and we would listen to the arguments and determine whether sufficient evidence existed to prove that a violation of this federal law occurred, I knew that was my professional legal opinion, and it would ultimately have to go through a person like yourself, Judge. So please tell us about your professional experience.
Okay, thank you. So after I passed the bar, opened up my own law practice, and I did family law for it. That was the type of cases that were coming through the door. So when you open your own law practice, you have to, generate your funds, generate your income. So what came through the door was family law. And I didn't really want to do the family law because it's a very emotional type of case where you see, as I always say, you see the really, really wonderful people, but you see them in the worst times of their lives. They're dismantling the family structure. They are possibly having to remove from having a two-income household to a one-income household, a two-parent, now single parent, deciding where the children will live, dividing up assets as well as debts, seeking out support, and just a lot, and possibly even getting protection for domestic violence, both men and women. It wasn't just the women being protected. The men also had to get protected.
Oh my goodness. I mean, but yet you came from such a good family. Did that help you in this endeavor at all, do you think?
It did. It did. But I also had to really use my personality and my own convictions. And I also had to provide some emotional intelligence. You have to have a lot of emotional intelligence dealing with divorce cases because everyone's emotions are at the high level. So as the attorney, you have to look and sit back and think outside, look at the case from you see it from your client's point of view, but you also can't see it from your client's point of view. Because if their point of view is very narrow, then all of a sudden you're going to get siloed into their position, whereas you need to see the case for what it's really, the full scheme of the case based on the law.
Uh-oh. So what I hear is early on, as you started, you were thrown into decision making. First of all, decisioning as a business person. Shout out for my entrepreneurs. Auntie was an entrepreneur before she was ever an attorney. I'm not even sure how the whole attorney thing evolved. Sometimes God just has plans beyond you. So I totally have respect for the decisioning that you had to make to go into private practice. But in that private practice, I hear you saying you really challenged yourself. Yes. To listen to your clients and make sure you kept a broad-based perspective of both sides, not just your client's sides.
Right. Because at the end of the day, and I remember getting some of the techniques and tips as I observed court. So there were days where I didn't have to do anything. And my office at the time was in Long Beach, California. And the old Long Beach courthouse was on Ocean Boulevard. And so was my office. So it was just crossing the street and going into the security. And I'm already inside the courthouse. And I remember hearing the late Kenneth Black, Judge Black, the Honorable Kenneth Black, and also the Honorable John Chmielewski. These were the judicial officers I appeared in front of most because we were in the same location, Long Beach, at the Long Beach courthouse. And the Honorable Kenneth Black always would pull the attorneys in. He says, you know what? You're either going to settle, you guys go outside and try to make it work, or I'm going to give you an order that no one's going to like. And we're looking at him like, whoa, right? But because we thought he was being a little harsh, but what he was really saying is, you all are not looking at the case based on the law. And based on the law, both of you all are probably going to get something you didn't want. So to avoid that, go out and negotiate and settle, right? And so I remember him telling me, as an attorney, you have the leadership in your case. So again, it's called client control, right? And there were times where you have to allow a little bit for the client to have their say, but you also have to rein it in and say, look, you hired me as a professional to represent you and to represent you in the best way. Here are the weaknesses of your case. Here are the strengths of your case. Had to tell them to them straight at the very beginning. And if you want to avoid these types of things and that could happen as a weakness or the worst case scenario, then let's try to settle the case. So
that was like in the early 2000s?
Yes.
You've been doing this for almost 30 years now.
Yes, I have. So
wait, I'm just sorry. So we started this saying, you hear about the Civil Rights Act being dismantled, and it's true. Section 2, gone. Section 5, gone. What can you do? You've got to look for a qualified candidate. I'm talking to a woman who's been in this game for 3 decades. That perks my ear. It should perk yours. And listen and learn how decisions are made. I'm sorry.
No, no worries, no worries.
I'm going to go back to something you said.
Okay.
You said you had to hear the tough kind of questions and maybe answer some tough questions.
Yes.
What does that mean to the rest of us? We don't really know what that means.
So those would be questions that, first of all, someone is upset. They just came from court, and they would the judges or the whomever would direct them to the self-help center, and they're not understanding. They want what they want, and so there are things that we cannot do. We have a scope of practices and areas that we can help you with, and there are areas we can't. So it's basically telling someone, no, we can't help you, but here's where we can show you where you can get the help. So it's also trying to turn the person's perspective from, okay, I can't get help here, and receive that, and now be open to receiving where they can get the help. So a lot of times the tough questions is to explain the no's, right? And then the whys, the reasons.
So you were doing that before you became a judge.
Yes.
When was your first time? And there are levels kind of to this thing. So I know you did something before becoming an ALJ. What type of decisions were you hearing at that time?
Okay, so you're talking about the FINRA. So I was in private practice, Financial Industry Regulatory Authority.
Shouldn't talk about the money, y'all. You know I had that. About the money, regulating money. What kind of regulations of money did you do?
So that's when the investors and their stockbrokers would have a disagreement, or the brokerage firms would have disagreements, or the brokerage firms and the stockbrokers would have different disagreements. And this was large. Yeah. So this was like large sums of money. Investors were not satisfied, or they thought that their investments were not reflecting on their level of comfort, where they are, I want something moderate. I want to invest in something that's not as progressive, or what is it called? The risk tolerance, yes, was not aligned to the type of investments that the stockbroker actually engaged. And then they lost their money. So there was, yeah.
Have a timeout. The only thing worse than the Civil Rights Act being dismantled is voting for somebody, okay, who doesn't understand how to protect my money. I'm just going to keep it real. And so I'm so thankful you are. Do all of the candidates have experience like you have?
I don't. I can't speak for them. I'm not supposed to. I'm only supposed to speak about myself as a candidate.
And I'm looking for that. Thank you for sharing that you've had that experience, because that's really, really important to me. Please continue.
So FINRA was a 3-panel decision-making body. And so it was myself and 2 other professionals. One would always be the actual broker, and it would be like 2 attorneys and a broker. And we heard cases, and they would last for several weeks sometimes. The easier ones or the simple ones would last maybe a week, a couple of days. And then we would reconvene, and we would have a discussion. And we began to decide the case as a one body unit, as we thought together. And I love that because we were able to ask questions with each other. The one that would be, there was always be one lead arbitrator, was an arbitrator. I was considered an arbitrator at the time. And I enjoyed it. But that was the first time I learned about, I call the pitch, where I would hear the positions from both sides of the parties. So the moving party and the defending party would both come and give me their opening statements, their arguments, present evidence. I would rule on the objections and the admissibility of evidence, and then hear their closing arguments. And then they would rest their case, and then we would reconvene. And then as the arbitrators, we would make a decision about the outcome of the case.
Wow, that's a lot of decisioning. And I'm sure for my audience, a lot of it's just kind of like, wow, okay, she's qualified. We get it, Auntie. We get it, Auntie. No, you're going to stay and listen. We're not done yet. Okay, because we haven't even gotten to seat 181. And I just want to say thank you for breaking it down in a way I don't think anyone else has broken it down. I love that you said the pitch. For those of us with a business background, there is no business organization known to man that's ever been made that did not have a sales arm. Like when you're a kid, you go to mom and dad, you got a side and brother got a side, and you're going to make the pitch to mom and daddy.
Right.
Okay. And then for you to say that and then just have like an official way of listening to things where you're not swayed. How do you keep yourself from saying, well, I like them, but I don't like them? How do you handle that? Is there a judicial way about that?
You just have to understand, you have to be fair and impartial. And that's what the parties are looking for you to be. And you have to be. So we had training. FINRA would train us. Mediation, we also had training in mediation. So that was like neutrality was really the focal point. The focus about a mediator is to be fair and impartial and to have active listening skills. So that is the most important aspect of a mediator is to listen and then to rephrase. So that's what we learned as in our training to be a mediator. Mm-hmm. And then also, again, the same type of training to be an arbitrator. And so when I started working for the Superior Court, that's when I saw neutrality at its finest, right? And I had to do it every day. So as a mediator and arbitrator, I did that sporadically as I would get a case or as I would have free time to volunteer as a mediator with the court. But as a self-help and a court employee, you live that life every day. You cannot have bias, favoritism. You have to be fair and impartial. So that was part of our daily task. So that's how I learned about neutrality and really had a different perspective about neutrality because we had to practice it every day on our job.
So you already, and this is before you actually became an ALJ. I mean, we're talking 15 years ago, even more.
Yes.
You're making decisions and practicing neutrality. I appreciate that and I respect that. Take us forward to the ALJ, the administrative law judge. That's just so incredibly impressive to me. Please share a little bit about that.
So I don't know, but I just applied to be an administrative law judge. And it was during the pandemic when my application finally popped through. And I'm going to tell you the story. I was at work and my dad had to go to the hospital and I was on my lunch break. And I saw a number, it said unknown, didn't know who the person was. But something said, say hello, this is Miss Lindsey, how may I help you? I normally don't answer calls that are unknown in that fashion.
Yeah, we don't do that. We don't do that. You know.
So if it's an unknown number, I let it go to voicemail, right? But something said, the God thing, something in me said, you need to answer this call. And you need to say, this is Miss Lindsey, how may I help you? And it was a presiding judge in Inglewood. Oh, and the first thing she said was, do you want the job?
What?
And I'm looking at her and I knew to say yes, but I'm like, what job? What are you talking about? And I said, sure, yes, I would like a job, right? And I'm like, tell me more about this job. And she began to tell me about the administrative law judge and how they're looking for more ALJs this was during the pandemic. So it was the California Unemployment Insurance Appeals Board. So we call it CUIAB. And this is the appeals board where people would apply for the Employment Development Department, the EDD, and their application was either denied or delayed, whatever the point was, and they needed to appeal that application. And sometimes employers would appeal as well, not just the employee, but employers would appeal. And the case would come to us, the ALJs, the administrative law judges.
Wow. So this is really interesting to me because here, you started, let's face it, she started her career on the playground in advocacy. Okay. But then she went on and you became an attorney. You did the self-help. You did a lot of things, but appeal rings a bell to me as an attorney on another level, because that means there was a issue that two parties could not resolve. They took the issue, y'all, to someone for resolution. There was a decision, and the parties are still fighting after the decision. And
right.
They come to you.
Right.
And that's it would seem to be another level of decisioning. Is it? You tell us.
Oh, absolutely. So part of the reason why I got hired is because I had so much experience with self-help and I already had the neutrality because I worked for the court. So as a court employee, you have to be neutral. All court employees are neutral, let alone also the judges. So that neutrality extended to we were the face of the court. at the self-help center, at the clerk's office, inside your courtroom. You are the face of the court. And so we had to continue to have the neutrality. So that was how I got hired, because I had so much neutrality experience and self-help experience working with a type all across board of different type of socioeconomic LA County residents. Now it got expanded to the state of California because of the EDD.
Okay. Okay.
CUIAB.
So now you're making decisions there, but that's not it. Most recently, you've been involved with decisions on special education.
Yes. I transferred to the special education after 2 years working for CUIAB. And I just want to let you know that that was the place where I got a lot of my judicial training, although I had foundational work and background, but I did the work as an ALJ with the unemployment appeals cases. So we had 31 cases, 31 hearings per week.
Whoa. 31 hearings.
Yes.
You're deciding 5-6 cases a day.
Yes.
Every week.
Every week. So the objective, and these were quick fires. Don't get me wrong. They were quick fires. My decisions maybe average between 3 to 5 pages. But what I would try, I wouldn't say try. What I did was, if the person did not receive their benefits, because this is during the pandemic, someone is unemployed. And so there was, again, that level of emotional intelligence, some type of compassion and empathy. Sure. I would tell them why the case did not reach the threshold. What were the facts that were missing? Because the rules would say X, and if the rule said X, Y, and Z, but your case only had X or Z and didn't have Y, I cannot rule it for you. I had to follow the rules.
So what's a threshold?
Threshold is where the level where you can either say I can grant. So they met the level for being eligible for unemployment benefits. So there were certain scenarios where it was either employee filed or an employer filed, be it a quit, a voluntary quit, or a actual termination. So was it a voluntary quit for good cause, or was the termination for misconduct? And so there were different levels of what would be considered misconduct and what was considered not, like negligence. Was it intentional? Was it a mistake? Did they have good cause for voluntarily quit under certain scenarios? So we had to analyze each case. It wasn't just a big, one big circle or a peg. Each case was individualized and had to be analyzed based on the facts, applied to the law. You create your analysis and then your conclusion.
I love it. So it sounds like there were elements.
Yes.
And if you didn't meet
all of the elements,
then you had not met the threshold.
Couldn't meet the threshold. And if you didn't meet the threshold, I would explain why, based on the testimony that you gave to me. And some people would still appeal, and that's fine. And so that is what I did. And the team, wonderful group of people, the staff for CUIAB, both I was at Pasadena as well, and Inglewood. So wonderful group of staff members, leadership there, enjoyed myself. But I was also an elementary substitute teacher. Oh. And I was also a teacher in adult ed. I taught English as a second language. I also taught at California State University at Los Angeles in the paralegal program. So teaching is in my blood. I come from a family full of teachers. My mom, cousins, yes, teachers, right? And so mediation, teachers, and then education, attorney, judge. So special ed had all of the elements that I was looking for. I volunteered for decades as a mediator because I believed in mediation so much. Now I'm paid as a mediator, and I'm in the special education arena where I saw, and I also had special ed students in my class. And so as a former teacher, you then have this full circle of teaching and being with the school districts and hearing about parents. And now you're in the law, but you also have mediation. So I have all three combined in this current position as a special ed administrative law judge.
So I want to talk about that a little bit, because when you were doing the 31 cases
yes.
A week, how many cases have you heard so far?
I would estimate Because the cases would also, like, if somebody was out sick, you would get extra cases. If I were out sick, but my cases would go to someone else. So I would say the average was at least 3,700.
Wait, you have been the presiding person over 3,700 cases.
I would say, and that's a modest estimate. I'm pretty sure it's probably more.
Okay, time out. Sorry. Your Honor.
Yes.
Just say a moment here. Civil Rights Act, back to that. There was a time when we didn't get a chance to sit in these seats, so we couldn't show that we could perform. And during that time, we definitely still needed a lot of help. We still need a lot of help today. There are a lot of seats we're not able to sit in. But I'm talking to someone who has sat in the seat and has performed 3,700 times. Please don't miss the point. It's important that you vote. Find those candidates in your jurisdiction, in your county, in your state, in your area that you think meet the qualifications to be worthy of your vote. I'm sorry, I just have to share that.
No worries. I appreciate that. So getting back to the type of cases, they were quick fires, as I always said, because we had, as soon as we finished those 31, you had another 31 and another. So the objective is to not create a backlog and to make sure that you push those cases out. And if someone is granted their unemployment benefits, there will be no delay on my part. So
not creating a backlog, that becomes an efficiency.
Oh, absolutely. So when I was working for the Superior Court as a court employee, I took courses. I was a supervisor. So I took courses in management, courses in supervision, and courses about case, the actual lifespan of the case, understanding the court's core mission, which is efficiency and efficient adjudication of all cases in a fair and impartial. I am paraphrasing, but that's one of the court's mission is efficiency, and that we will dispose of cases in an efficient manner, in a fair and impartial way. So part of it is efficiency, running your courtroom, time management, case management. So I understood the importance, and that all parlays down to public trust. So why would you have a case stuck on the books for 5 years? You want a finality. People want an outcome. And I have heard from the actual litigants, hey, I felt that, although I lost, I was heard. I understand why I lost. I'm walking in thinking I could win, but I realize I don't have the winning case, but I was able to explain myself. This judge heard me. So those were satisfied customers, is when people felt the judge didn't hear them, they felt rushed, or they just didn't have a good understanding about the process. So that's when the judge would send those particular parties over to the self-help, and we would explain the process to them. So again, one of my core requirements, or my core mission, is educate, right? Empower, and then engage, right? So that was some of the things that I also continue to do in my work. Ethic is to educate, right? Educate myself. You would also try, when I was with CUIEB, I would try to educate the person that's reading my decision. Why did you lose? Or this is the reason why. Even if it's the employer, yes. Right? Educate, and then they would empower, and then they would be willing to engage. So they won't be so shy to try again.
I love that. So you're empowering and educating people to be able to enforce their rights, not just in your court, but throughout life.
Correct. Yes.
By understanding that there is a protocol, a procedure, there are elements that need to be established, and you just don't get to come in on a feeling and win with Judge Thanayi Lindsey.
Right. And so also efficiency was when the department EDD would flag cases that were possibly overpayments. We call those overpayment cases, where people misunderstood the application, and the question said, did you earn any money this week? And they would say no, but they did. They're thinking any money from the job. Let's say they had 2 jobs and they lost one, and they apply for unemployment benefits on the job that they lost, but they're still working the first job or the primary job. So when they ask, they would answer the question, did you earn any money this week? But there was nothing that said about the job that you lost. It just said any money this week. The answer should be yes, because you are employed. or that person was employed, but they would answer no, and that would create an overpayment. And so we had to go through and look through those overpayments to see if there were any fraud, if there's any intentional type of things. And there were penalties that came with those overpayments. It was some additional penalties. So we had the ability to either enforce those penalties or release the penalties.
My God. She's enforcing fraud, y'all. I'm just like listening. It's like, I don't know what the checklist of all the things is that you look for in a judicial candidate, but y'all, are you hearing these? These point by point by point? There is a lot. There is a lot. And fraud. Oh, Lord have mercy. Going back to the seat you're running for next here, seat 181. The Superior Court judges. Please tell me, why are you running for this? You've done so much, you could go home and call it a day.
I've always been a public servant. I've always served my community in the capacity through my nonprofit. I don't want to talk about the nonprofit because I am a candidate, so I want to make sure there's no conflict of interest. But I have been at the Taste of Soul. I have been even up here at our Hart Park. That was my very first public event, and then just continued on with Altadena fire victims. It was at Hillside Cathedral. Shout out to the pastors, the Kennebrews, and they said, "Come on, they had food giveaway. People stopped at the table." I heard some really compelling stories in Altadena. I took some pictures of just the devastation. Like a house would stand, but all the other houses were burnt down. It was just mind-boggling where you would see the plot where the house was, the square. And you could actually see and imagine a house was actually the foundation. You see the foundation, whatever that you saw. But the resiliency of the residents of Pasadena, Altadena, as well as the Malibu and the Palisades, lots of resilience there. Volunteer with a lot of organizations such as the League of Women Voters, the NAACP as a life member. I'm now being inducted with the National Association of University Women, NAUW, and so many other organizations. My local church, West Angeles Church of God in Christ, the women in ministry there. So many avenues of serving the community, and then just having a heart for people. And the background that I have, the various areas of law, so the family law, domestic violence, the securities brokerage, securities law, unemployment, employment law, now special education law, as well as teaching civil procedure, contracts, corporations. And so, and being a part of the Superior Court with, again, having a lifestyle of neutrality, a lifestyle of being when I say a lifestyle, a professional lifestyle of neutrality as a former court employee. So I'm running because I want to continue to be that extension for the community. I would like to, I am the voice. I believe I'm the people's judge. I've been told that you're the people's judge. And, there's this thing called the People's Court, but I'm not trying to borrow that. But it's really the heart for the people. I have walked in some of their shoes. I've been in places where we have been excluded or have not had our voices heard. Again, coming from South Los Angeles, humble beginnings, my parents, I can tell you some things. They told us stories where they did not have running water. They lived, we call it off the grid. But back then, they had no running water. They had to go outside and, use the bathroom. They did not have electricity. They had to use kerosene lamps. And so those are the things that I came up from. That's the type of people that experiences that my parents shared with us. And that's who we are, the humility, being able to survive and be resilient. And so I put all that together, the emotional intelligence, the patience, I call it professional empathy, where you take the time to listen to why, when I was in self-help, a lot of people were frustrated. Again, why all this frustration? What's going on? What are we doing wrong? Right? As a supervisor, what's going on? And the gentleman came up to me and he says, "You're not doing anything wrong. You just have to understand where we're coming from. And so that then broke open that ability for me to have more even somewhat of an empathy, being empathetic, but not so where it's so that it drives where I become biased. So there's a level where you then say, okay, the frustration has nothing to do with me. It has to do with what's going on. There's a level of sacrifice when people come to court that I don't know that other people are aware of. Perhaps it's a single mom. She has to get find a sitter. She has to pay for parking. If you are work for an hourly rate, if you don't show up, you're missing that day's pay. And now you have to figure out how to make up the whatever monies that you pay, and not only missed pay, but spent money. So there are a lot of things that people somewhat look past. And I want to say I'm looking into those types of things. Not only that type of court user or court party, but also the attorneys. Having experience with attorneys now, I have attorneys who come before me. Majority of the cases are from firms. Having to entreat attorneys, having the courtroom decorum, all of those things wrap into the experience that makes me an eligible candidate for seat number 181. Not only the legal experience, the background, but also the community connections, but also who I am as a person, patient. Mediation, I talk about mediation has changed my life. I look for win-win situations, being patient and have a listening ear.
I want to kind of leave. One of the questions that we have is because, at my heart, I'm a business person. I believe in building brands. I think every family should have a brand for their generational wealth and legacy. And I've said before, for me, part of my brand is creating transformation. And so I always ask, I want to try and ask if there's one word that you can use, that people can use to describe you, Judge Thanayi Lindsey, long after everything is done and said and done, what might that be? What might they say?
So I was at the NAACP's event at Altadena, Pasadena recently this week, and I talked about the number of cases. And I got a lot of feedback. That's Judge 3000. That's Judge 3000. And that's what they were talking about, that I was the judge that had over 3,000 experience of holding 3,000 cases, right? Heard 3,000 cases. So that was like the little nickname that was given to me by those that attended, even some of the leadership. So they called me Judge 3000 because of the number of cases. So but the legacy that I want to leave is a legacy again of educating, empowering, and then engaging. That's the legacy.
Very good. Very good. Empowering, engaging. Judge 3000. I love it.
Let me just say this. Judges have a lot of discretion. And you would want to have a judge that's open-minded when applying discretion. Discretion means, do you get punished or do you go home? Do you set bail at an amount that keeps you in jail, or do you set the bail amount where you can go home and maintain your family relationship and keep your job? So I want you to look at a judge like myself who is open-minded and would be willing to look at the totality of the circumstances, the holistic approach or view of why a person is here. We had a quick conversation before we started, and I said, if someone is burglarizing or stealing, and what is the motivation behind that? Because they just didn't have a job? Well, maybe they have an addiction that they're trying to maintain and keep that addiction going to fund the addiction. So maybe we divert instead of putting them in prison, and now they have a record. Maybe we will do a diversion, right, and put them in a treatment program. There's called Care Court. There are military veterans courts, all these types of things that the Superior Court offers and collaborates with the community to help improve. Even Care Court, I just discovered, will provide housing. But it's voluntary, but you have to get involved with Care Court. And it is there for our community who may have suffered from mental health, mental illness, some type of needing treatment, but it's a holistic view. So again, someone is open-minded. someone who's looking to see to, again, I use this phrase, to include the excluded. I had another video talking about including the excluded, and open-mindedness. You want a judge who has that type of skill set and ability so that because we provide consequences. I am an administrative law judge. Either your case is, one party is going to win and the other party is not. So we provide consequences to every day, and we affect areas of our lives. Dependency court, will your child go into foster care? Or will you get reunited with your child? Adoption, those types of things. Juvenile, will your child be tried as an adult, be tried, or will your child go into other, programs? So think about a judge who's willing to be open-minded and exercise his or her discretion, where it will benefit and put a balance for, again, public safety, as well as trying to, again, educate, engage, and empower so that people will have a second chance.
I love that. You heard it here first. Educate, engage, empower. We will be including a link for your inclusion video, talking more about those points. If you have a child, let the children watch it. Let them get their first introduction to a judge who they can actually understand, who speaks clear English that they can understand. And make sure you take the time to go out on June 2nd and vote. And vote for forevermore, y'all. Civil rights might be dead, but your responsibility is alive and kicking. Refer back to this video at any time for future election. Peace, love, and blessings. We're done.